Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
No,
Oh,
good.
hello, everyone. Welcome to our threat hunting showcase. We have here Mickey, who's already kind of introduced himself. He's our APAC cybersecurity strategist, and I'm Richard. I'm the regional marketing manager here in APAC. Really excited to be here with you. But before I let Mickey start, there's some housekeeping items. Firstly, on the left-hand side of your panel, you'll see a question box. Feel free to upload any question during any time of the webinar, and we'll get on it as soon as we can. On the right side, you'll see a contact us form or a contact us button. Click that if you want to reach out to us, say hello, or request a demo or anything of that sort. And finally, if you want the video or the on-demand recording after the webinar, we'll send it out to you shortly after this conclusion of the webinar. And now, with all that out of the way, Mickey, I'll let you start. Muted. Mickey, it's still muted.
Wow. Okay, let's try that. Take three. I was so excited I almost pushed Richard out of the virtual way, saying, let me take this. So thanks for the introductions, Richard. And yeah, I'm excited to be walking through our threat hunting showcase. We run these quite regularly, so it's something that I'm passionate about, and something that the Devo teams always trying to break the norm when it comes to threat hunting. So hopefully we're going to share some of our experiences through this showcase, and we're going to keep it on point and sort of close up about 5 minutes to the hour, depending on your location. So in terms of agenda, we want to make sure that we cover four things mainly. Do a Devo overview, why organizations are choosing Devo, then talk a little bit about the threat hunting process, then finally getting into sort of a demo, then wrap up. So very sharp and to the point. Okay, so why do organizations choose Devo, and how are we actually materially helping organizations? At first, we're helping organizations increase their visibility. Traditionally, when they're acquiring a data analytics technology, they're limited to how much data they're able to collect in a given period due to normally licensing issues, or alternatively, they can't hold data on for large periods of time. So the quote is retention. So how Devo helps organizations that we allow them to collect more data in a fair and commercial model, which we'll talk about soon, but we also allow them to keep that data for a longer period of time. So by default, we have 400 days of hot data available for consumers to use. And this is different to that in the industry. Typically in the industry, you're expected to only keep 90 days of data, and of those 90 days, maybe 7 of those days is hot. And so your search experience as a hunter can be impacted severely. How that affects the threat hunting process when you've got only 7 days of hot data is that your hunts are much slower, and so you iterate at a slower rate. In addition, we're helping analysts increase their productivity, and you're going to see some of that evidence today. We're going to help analysts and also hunters increase their productivity. We've got automation technology embedded into Devo to allow you to automate some of those common hunting processes. We've got investigations and response all in a nice encapsulated workflow. So you're no longer having to jump between what we call swivel chair analysts between different consoles to get to an end objective. And finally, we're helping organizations reduce their mean time to respond, remediate, and contain through our autonomous hunting, where what we're able to do is, off the back of an indicator or an alert, we can understand the entirety of an attack. So we will, from an indicator, hunt backwards and hunt forwards and provide an end-to-end attack story, allowing you to get the full picture from the moment that alert occurs. And we can do that asking around about 1,000 questions a second over many different TTPs. And we're built on a no compromise architecture for logging and security analytics. We're a cloud native technology, not a cloud hosted technology. So we're born in the cloud, not on premise, and then move to the cloud. And we're able to ingest any form of data, whether that's on premise or cloud, seamlessly. We have native multi-tenancy, which is really, which is excellent for MSSPs and also large organizations who need to have separation by different business units. We've got a single SaaS license, which we'll talk about in the coming slides, that makes it really easy to consume our technology without having to, worry about the bits and bytes that are flowing through our environment. And we have a low total cost of ownership without the trade-offs typically in data analytics technology. In terms of our zero data compromise, so our detections, I like to think of them as in-stream detection. So as we can see the data, we can act on it then. That's how efficient our technology is. And you can ask any question without limits. So we don't have the traditional methods of saying you can only ask this many questions per day, and then we're going to resource constraint you. And that's what you might hear of a cloud-hosted technology. But arguably, one of the most important parts is the multiple uses. So typically with just a pure SIM play, all you can get is what the SIM provides. But with Devo, you can put the data in once and use it many times. So, for example, the firewall logs, which we'll use as a threat hunt today, can be used for the network operations center. They can be used for IT operations. They can also be used for security operations. And we enable all users finally. So with our no-code analytics, it is very simple to use our technology without having to understand the query language. And so with that, I want to talk about our simple and fair licensing construct. This is, I guess, a differentiator when you're trying to work out, is this technology right for me, or how is it going to affect my hunting experience? Traditionally, when we think about a typical organization, they have very seasonal data. It goes up and down, up and down. During the middle of the week, it's quite busy, and then on the weekends, it dips. Typically, what you're licensing for with your traditional technology is the single day peaks. So those 5 days in between, you get charged on that. But your data is seasonal. And so the most fair licensing construct is an average of that. And so that's Devo's difference. We provide a 30-day average of your ingest. So that makes sure that as you get seasonal data, you're not pinned for it. And what I've seen in the field is this can have around about a 20% reduction on your licensing cost in comparison to the peak method. So an organization who would typically go out and ask the SIM industry for a terabyte per day license can get the same outcome for an 800 gigabyte license with Devo. So that's a very material impact on the commercial model. And so when we talk about Devo, all we care about really is the single license metric, which is the 30-day average ingest. With that, you get unlimited queries, all of our premium applications, data encryption at rest, plus 24/7, 365 customer support. There's some other ones here, but in the interest of time, I won't go through each and every one. So with the Devo aspect out of the way, let's talk about the threat hunting process and threat hunting overview. And the way I like to start these discussions is by providing a definition. And so threat hunting is the human-centric process of proactively searching through networks for evidence of attacks that evade existing security monitoring tools. This is not my quote. This is something I got from a practical threat hunting from Chris Sanders, a really good instructor and really great course for people who are interested in threat hunting. But it's a definition that I've stuck by because it really rings true. And so why does it ring true to me personally? Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, about what's not threat hunting and what is threat hunting. So threat hunting, or not threat hunting, is a tool you buy. You don't just buy threat hunting. And that's sort of why I made sure, using the words human-centric, which I really, really like. It's something that a person does when they're investigating through their environment for an attack. But it is a process you implement to draw the comparison. Organizations have threat hunting processes that we'll go through, and iterating on them as efficiently as possible is important. In addition, threat hunting is not an automated activity. It's something that you might automate after, once you define the technique and you alert it, but later down the track, it's initial implementation. It's not an automated activity, but it is human-based. So a human going through, looking for hunts by themselves, going through that activity in a methodical method is the important part. And the last two I'll talk about is searching IOCs, searching IOCs is not something that is threat hunting, but using an IOC to hypothesize how it's used is important. So for example, if you see a domain as an IOC, you want to think about and hypothesize how that domain might be used. Is that domain used for phishing? Is that domain used for C2? These are types of techniques that you can use for threat hunting that will help you understand whether or not this IOC can be used in a hunt. And that's the difference between just using an IOC or using an IOC for a threat hunting purpose. And so to think about the threat hunting life cycle, we talked about what it isn't, what it is and what it isn't. Let's think about the process, about how you'd go through threat hunting. So first, hypothesis creation, and that's intelligence-driven and situational awareness. You might go out and read an artifact, maybe something you're looking for a technique, and on MitoAttack's website, and you look at a report related to an adversary that targets your industry. You create that hypothesis. Moving on, you do the research. An excellent method of understanding how you can detect something is to actually go through and do the simulation. We're seeing a rise in breach simulation technologies, where organizations are actively going out and executing techniques to see how it presents in their data analytics technology. Most of our customers, some of the guidance we provide to them is to go out and run things like atomic red team when you're looking at a technique to see what it looks like. Or even if you are going to detect it, I've seen situations where organizations thought they were covered, then they ran their research, their TTP simulation, and all of a sudden they realized, okay, we're actually not logging correctly, and they made changes to it. But this process is very efficient at finding out what's working, but also conversely, what's not working. And then from there, you're going to go collect data. You have to have some data in your environment. This is the part where you look back at the research and say, okay, well, if I simulate it, how would I collect this data at scale across my enterprise? Because there's no point doing a hunt if the simulation showed that you were not collecting this data at scale. And so going through that process of understanding what you're collecting, what you're not, passing that data to make it usable for the hunter is the next step. And then finally, analysis and documentation. So you can go through this process and then create a new hypothesis, or alternatively, you can convert that hunt into an alert. That way you're automating that process after that manual process has been triggered, and feeding new intel, new detections into the SOC. And so with that, what I thought I'd do is create a fictitious threat that we could walk through to look what it looks like when it comes to reading a threat intel snippet and then creating a hypothesis. So you've just read this threat intel report that details a new adversary group, Janky Bear, and Janky Bear is using compromised non-corporate hosts as a beachhead in which to launch attacks. Initial compromise is normally proxied through these hosts and can use a variety of TTPs. So with that, our hypothesis can be, the adversary, Janky Bear, will use a C2 server from an uncommon ASN, ASORG, utilizing a non-corporate connection, and evidence of this may occur in DNS logs or network connection logs. So we've given ourselves the bounds in which we can work. And so with that, what I'll do is pivot over to a demonstration. And in this demonstration, we're going to be walking through that specific hunt. And we're going to do that through the lens of Devo. And so with Devo, all of the data within our environment is categorized through our tagging system. So it's a hunter's dream. No longer do you have to guess what data do you have access to, where it's stored, is it passed, none of that. It's all categorized, so it's very easy to understand. And so, for example, if I was to look, if I was just interested in looking at and hunting through my IDS logs or DNS, the simplest, typing in the word DNS, and I've got my bind data in here, for example, in my demo data. If I want to look at my cloud data, again, very simple, type in cloud, Office 365, and I can pivot into my data set. But for this hunt, what we are interested in is our firewall data. And we're not just interested in selecting just one vendor. What we want to do is provide all of our vendors in one union table, as Devo calls it. And so rather than jump straight into the hunt and sort of work through the fields that I may or may not use, what I am going to do is to fast track this hunt is actually select the things or the details that are important to me. And to do that, what I do want to do is to say, well, I'm looking for event date because time is important. I want to look at the action. So what occurred? Was it an accept, deny? I also want to look at the source IP, dest IP, and dest port. Now, if I make this this search and I'm missing something, I can always add them in later. Another one, that I would also add is bytes sent and bytes received. So, yeah, back to what I was saying. If I miss a field, it's no harm. There's no issue in adding a new field into the view. But for a hunter, they want to be completely focused on what's at hand. You don't want to be including other fields that might confuse you and sort of send you down a garden path. And so when we're thinking about this hunt, well, we're thinking about a C2 server, C2 connection. Something that has to occur is that there should be some data transfer. And so what we'll do is we'll get rid of everything that doesn't have any bytes being transferred. So we'll go where is not null bytes. And so with Devo, when we build a query, our query editor is logically building out, our no-code analytics logically builds out this very simple query for us without us having to learn the complexity of a query. And so I've got from, select, where is not null bytes sent. But I also want to say where the action is accept, so where there's been a successful connection. And I want to look for outbound traffic. And so to do that with Devo, it's quite simple. I can select on the column that I want to interact with, and I can filter it. So I can say, show me where it's private IPv4 addresses. And you'll notice that our no-code analytics makes it really simple to build this query in a very efficient manner. Now, the next part is I want to look for outbound communication. So I want to look for public address. And using our no-code analytics, I want to repeat that same operation. So I'm saying, is public IPv4. And so now I've got myself a much more condensed view of the world. I've got myself anything that's going from source IP to destination IP. So the source IP is private, destination IP is public. Now, in order to ensure that I'm filtering on the right connections, what I do want to do is filter out the stuff that is not of interest. And so in the report, there was identification that they use clear text protocols, HTTP. And so to do that, what I do want to do is filter my view onto port 80 to make sure that I'm only focusing on HTTP requests. And so what you'll notice that I've got a large amount of data, and there's too much for a human analyst to work through and to understand what do I need to do with this. Now, if we think back to the hunt was using non-corporate connections, so home connections, cable, DSL, cellular. And so how do you do that inside of data analytics technology? And this is where enrichment comes in for a hunter. Enriching more than just the country name. So we can do country name, which will show that now, because that's always a good indicator, because rare locations are important. I'll include the country name. And rather than actually just give the country code, I'm actually going to provide the country name. So this is where Devo's no-code analytics, again, makes it easy for the hunter. I've got the country name, and it's going to enrich it to the country code. But we don't stop there. What you might have noticed for the eagle-eyed among you is that you would have seen me type in the letters MM2. And so what is MM2 within Devo? So it's actually an enterprise edition of the MaxMind database. And so what we're able to do is further enrich our data set and do things like provide an accuracy radius, ASN, the coordinates, which is normal, the ISP owner. And we also have things like the MM speed, the connection speed. So let's go about and add the AS org, the owner, the ISP owner, and also repeat the same process for bandwidth. And so now that I've got this extra intelligence, I can see some things that are, appear at Microsoft, Google. Okay, well, we can get rid of those because they're corporate. And think about the hunt. Well, there's stuff that we don't really need. So let's focus on the cable DSL connections, because think about the much smaller portion. When we have a null, that's where MaxMind doesn't have any intelligence about it. That's okay. We'll just focus on what we do have intelligence for. We press apply. Now, when I do that, I want to think about, well, what is the behavior of a C2? This is through that simulation. And the common behavior is repeat volume amounts. So in other words, a byte format that doesn't change. And something that jumps out to me immediately is 1517. I've got this 1517 bytes sent. And I'm like, well, that's odd. Why is there just this consecutive, what might be a beacon? And so to pivot on this, to understand, okay, well, is this something malicious? I can do, a couple things. I can pivot outside of Devo, and this is our, seamless workflows, and I can shove that IP into VirusTotal and see if I've ever seen this information before. Or alternatively, I can use this as a pivot point and filter in another tab. And what this will do is go, anytime I've seen bytes sent as 1517, show me the results. And this is what this will allow me to do once I make modifications to the rest of the actual query, say, show me where it's byte sent 1517. And so now here I've got myself a much smaller subset to work with. And it's like, now I've got the assets that are involved, and I can see a couple here that are concerning to me, more than just one IP. Now I've got something more to actually work on. And I can start to see I've got some IPs with different AS orgs, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Now, this would warrant further investigation. Now, in a lot longer time frame, we'd probably go from here and pivot to the endpoint host logs, maybe the EDR logs, to understand what's going on. But with the interest of time, we'll leave that for another demo. And so with that, let's pivot back to the presentation. And so what you just saw in that demonstration, how effortlessly we went from a hypothesis to a hunt to something that we could use as evidence for our next hypothesis. looking at endpoint logs from those IP addresses. This is the process that you can go through efficiently with Devo. That hot data means that you're not being punished for the pivot. And in addition, our no-code analytics makes it really simple for even junior analysts to actually jump on and be masters of their data. And so some key takeaways before we wrap up. Research is important. One of the most common failures of new hunters is just to go out and go hunt. Look through some tactics and techniques. Anything is better than just clicking around, because often I know that I'm speaking from experience of clicking around and hunting what I thought was hunting back in the day. You end up just being overwhelmed with the data presented to you, because these sim technologies are getting bigger and badder over time. A good hypothesis will equal a good outcome. So if you don't have a hypothesis, then you're probably going to end in a what we call like chasing your tail, because you're pivoting here, there, and everywhere. A hypothesis ensures that you've got a path to actually see something through, and not all the time. You won't always get the result you're looking for. You won't always find a baddie, for want of a better term, but you may build a new detection for the SOC and improve your coverage across the MITRE attack. And 3, access to a diverse range of data is the key to success. Now, whilst we only showed you firewall logs today, EDR, cloud, DNS, having a broad range of data ensures that if you run through these hunts, you can pivot to an alternate data source and repeat that activity. And hunting doesn't need to be perfect. That's one of the things I'll key takeaway. You saw today as the kickoff to this presentation that the hunt was not perfect, but the good thing is that we got through it, and that you can do that really easy. It doesn't need to be perfect. I was always told perfect is the enemy of good. As long as you're doing that process and moving the bar forward, you're doing well. And so with that, we're going to wrap up. There is a question that said, how would you ingest Windows endpoint event logs into your system when they're working from home? Great question. So generally when we see these questions, generally we see these situations, apologies, what happens is the traditional cloud hosted technologies, or maybe on-premise, really can't collect those organizations that are mobile. The mobile workforce is the norm. Recommendation is to, for these particular hosts, is to use something like a cloud native EDR. They're really excellent for that method if they do support Windows endpoint collection, or alternatively deploying like a SIM agent. I've seen many SIM agents work in the field, and I won't make recommendations now, but deploying an agent on that laptop, wherever that move, if it's a laptop or it's a Windows endpoint on home, allows you to have visibility of that data set as they move through, and so move outside of the four walls of the corporate environment. Great question. It's a very valid concern. Great. So if I press the right button. So look, if you want to reach out to someone in the Devo team, Asia Pacific, we have Mickey@devo.com, Kane.Fraser@devo.com, or APAC_sales@devo.com. So there's always someone to reach out to at Devo. Alternatively, you can reach us on LinkedIn or Signal for the secure people. So with that, I'll pass on to Richard to close up.
Thank you, Mickey. And another way is just to click on the right side of our panel here and fill in the form and reach out to us there as well. So we got another question, but a comment. Well done, mate. So good job. That demo was on point. So thanks once again to Mickey for that. And we'll wrap it up here. Once again, thanks again for attending. I'll send the on-demand link after this webinar, and hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Thank you.